It is day 10 of Vlogmas, and putting together this list may have caused me to have a slight existential crisis. Hi everyone, my name is Chloe, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here today. Today is day 10 of Vlogmas. I'm going to be uploading a new video every day in December, up to and including Christmas Day. This year we're doing it a little bit different, and we're going to be doing a mixture of bookish and theatrical content. And we are on a theatrical day today. And, you know, I talk about theatre a lot on this channel. I go to the theatre a lot, you'll see it in my vlogs. But I've never actually sat down and told you, like, what all my favourite shows are. Like, you probably gathered a fair amount from, like, when I've been talking, but I've never, like, gone down and be like, okay, so this is, like, my ultimate list of favourite musicals of all time. And, I mean, that is what this list is supposed to be. This video is slightly inspired by Meg from 12 Books a Day. I mean, of course it is. Who else is the theatrical video going to be inspired by? But basically, she sent me a voice note a couple of days ago saying, for no reason whatsoever, what are your 9 favourite musicals of all time? And I'm like, number 1, you are clearly Christmas present shopping. Number 2, 9 is a very specific number, and how dare you ask me this and give me, like, not very long to think of the answer. Like, it was stressful. I needed time to formulate this list, and I still haven't actually got it down to, like, a decent amount. I gave her about 15 options, and then last night when I was prepping this video, I've kind of narrowed it down to, I think, a top 10 that I think is in order, but I also have honourable mentions, and there are so many other honourable mentions that I haven't been able to fit on this list because I've kept it to a maximum of 15, and it's stressing me out because I already want to change things. But, like, the top 3 are pretty much set in stone. The top 5 is near enough set in stone. I just need to do a little bit more investigation. The top 10, it starts to vary a little bit, and then we have my honourable mentions where, like, that can change rapidly. But basically what I'm going to do is talk you through my favourite shows, why I love them so much, and if I've seen them, like, if there's particular productions and things that I've loved, because some of these as well, it depends on, like, the version of it that I'm watching. Like, there's a lot to this. I hope you are ready for me to just like spew theatrical thoughts at you. Enjoy. So we're going to go in reverse order. We're going to start with the honourable mentions. Like I said, these ones are very subject to change, and I will explain why, because for most of these there is a reason why it's not quite in that top 10 yet. So we'll go with the first one, which is actually one of the newest shows I've listened to, and that is the reason why it's not in my top 10, because I've only really listened to it in the last couple of months, and I've been obsessed with it, and I do have tickets to see it next year, but I need to give it a little bit more time before I say it's, like, all-time top 10, although it's definitely heading that way. That musical is Next to Normal. So this is a show that started in, I want to say, 2008, 2009. It was a while ago. Never been performed professionally in the UK. From what I can gather, the rights of it got bought, and then that company decided not to mount a production of it. There's been other interest in productions, but because of where the rights were sitting, they haven't been able to put anything on. The rights have, like, sort of freed up recently, and it is now going to be put on at the Donmar Warehouse next year, which I have got tickets for and I'm very, very excited about. I'd heard about this musical many, many years ago, like pretty much when it was first happening, because it was one of those that was advertised as a, if you like Rent, you may like this show, which I do very much enjoy Rent, so it is very much a show that I wanted to listen to, but for some reason I just never did. And then this year, the obsession with a certain musical theatre actor whose initials are AT started taking off a little bit more, and I decided that I would finally listen to Next to Normal, because Aaron Tveit does play Gabe in this, which is one of the supporting characters, and I love this show so much. Like, it is an intense show. I'm just going to say that from the off. Basically, the main character is struggling with her mental health, and it is about her family trying to get to help with that, and what help is available, and how sometimes the treatment is actually worse than the condition itself. There is so much more to it than that, but I don't want to tell you too much because you could give massive spoilers for the plot of this. But basically, it's a very small cast. There are only 6 characters in it. They're all kind of on stage throughout the show. I have watched a bootleg, by the way, and the way the staging was done with people kind of constantly looking over each other is fantastic. Like, I really love what they did with the staging, so I am nervous about the London production, but the songs in this are so good. The lyrics in it, they're funny, but they also make you think about things, and it's just really messed up, and I am not going to be able to give you coherent thoughts on this one because it's still very new to me, but I love it so much. Another honourable mention is one that I have seen. I've actually seen it 3 times, but I've only seen it this year, and that is Bonnie and Clyde. So I saw the concert version of this back in January with Jeremy Jordan and Frances Mailey McCann, and then I saw the full production when it transferred to the Arts Theatre. I saw that twice. That one had Jordan Luke Gage and Frances Mailey McCann in it, and I've become obsessed with this show. This is one of the cast recordings I've listened to the most this year, partly because Jeremy Jordan's voice is just, like, superb. I won't lie, that is the main reason why I went went to see it in the first place was because I wanted to see Jeremy Jordan. It was nice to see him actually act in something, because I've only seen him live in concert. Whenever I've seen him act, it's been in something filmed, so it was nice to see him on stage doing some acting, because although it was a concert version, it was a very heavily staged concert and it was practically the full show, just with like a more simplistic set. But I ended up really enjoying the show, and that is why I've sort of gone back to watch it since. I also have some tickets booked for it next year because it's coming back to the West End next year, and again, it's one that's just a little bit too new for me to put on like an all-time favourites list, but it is like a nice mix of being this kind of like fun show, because like they are clearly having fun with like the various crimes and things that they're doing, but also having this like more of an edge to it, because like it doesn't have a happy ending, let's just put it that way. It's based on a true story, but it did not end up well for Bonnie and Clyde. But it was just like how the entire thing came together just really made me love it, and I can't wait to see it again next year. Another honourable mention is one that I will be seeing soon, because I'm going to be seeing it next week as of filming this. By the time you're watching this, I should have already seen it. It is Newsies, another Jeremy Jordan show. The only version of it that I've seen so far is the Pro Shot that has Jeremy Jordan in it, and this is just such a fun show. Like, the songs are mostly all very high energy. There's so much dancing in this, and if you want to be like blown away by musical theatre dancing, watch the Pro Shot of this, because they are all so good, except for Jeremy Jordan. He runs away to the back of the stage whenever there's dancing involved. It's one of my favourite things, is spot where the main character's hiding while everyone else is doing the dancing around him. Jeremy Jordan's great, but he's not a triple threat. He can sing, he can act, and he can move somewhat, but he is not a dancer. Anyway, like I said, Newsies is just a very fun show, but it is about a more serious topic. It's about these kids who are having to work to stay alive and being taken advantage of by the rich men in power, but then they go on strike, and it's like really rousing, because you're just like getting behind these kids who are fighting against the men in power. It's fantastic. I'm really excited to go and see it in person, because I feel like it's going to be one where I'm just going to come out feeling very energised. But with this one, I have liked it for long enough for it to be in my top 10, but I don't know, it could go higher when I see it in person, but at the minute it's like just outside of the top 10. Speaking of just outside of the top 10, I do have two more honourable mentions, and I'll try and be quicker talking about these because I've realised that I am rambling a bit. But first up, we have Little Shop of Horrors, which I have seen the film many times, too many times to count. I've seen the stage show twice. I love the story of Little Shop of Horrors. I adore the film. I think the reason why it's not quite in my top 10 is that when I've seen the stage shows, I just wish I could have seen them do something a little bit more interesting with it. It's been very like the two productions I've seen have been like carbon copies of each other, and I would like to see them like just play around with it a little bit more. I feel like there have been productions that have done that, but I haven't had a chance to see them. So like there was one at the Regent's Park Open Air Theatre, and I would have liked to have seen that, and I would love to have had the opportunity to see it when it's been on Broadway recently, because some of the casts that they've had have been fantastic. But I feel like Little Shop of Horrors, if I see it with the right cast and the right production, has a chance to like really skyrocket up my list. But as it stands at the minute, it's like just outside of the top 10. And then one last honourable mention is Heathers. Heathers is another one that's just a really fun time, but also has like some dark topics. Heathers is one that I got obsessed with when I first went to see it. I went to see it when it was like first on in the UK at the Other Palace with Carrie Hope Fletcher and Jamie Moscato, and like I can't explain the hold that musical had on me at the time. I went to see it because I like Carrie Hope Fletcher. I'd seen her in a few things before, and I had listened to the off-Broadway version of Heathers. I enjoyed it enough, but there were a couple of things that like weren't my favourite. One of the songs that they actually took out and swapped with something else, so good move there to swap out Blue for You're Welcome. I think it works a lot better. But also they added some other songs into the UK production which kind of fleshed out the story a little bit more, and it was very much the performances as well. Like Carrie Hope Fletcher as Veronica was amazing. I expected her to be. All of the Heathers were fantastic. It was the first time I've seen Jodie Steele in anything, and I really love her as a performer. But then Jamie Moscato as JD, like it was just so good. Like from the second of Freeze Your Brain at the beginning when he says you're planning your future, Veronica Sawyer, I'm just like, I am here for this performance. And then when we got to Meant to Be Yours at the end, like I've seen 3 different people on stage portray JD now, and I've seen 4 if you include the Pro Shot. And of the other 3, no one else was able to like quite capture the intensity of that song in the way that he did, and just like quite how deranged that character actually is. Well, like before that he'd kind of tried to hide it and be like a little bit charming, and then he got to that one and it's just like, no, I'm just gonna lay it all out on the table, and it was so good. And I'm gonna stop now because I will start talking about Jamie Moscato performance later on in this list again, so don't you worry about it. Okay, so I've done my honourable mentions. I've already been filming for 15 minutes. Let's actually start talking about my top 10 musicals of all time, shall we? So I have tried to put these in order, but it is subject to change, as I said before. But at number 10 right now is In the Heights. Now, hear me out. In the Heights is a superior Lin-Manuel Miranda musical. Like, Hamilton is fantastic. I love Hamilton. I have seen it multiple times. I also became addicted to the Hamilton cast recording. It is what got me through uni. Like, one of my flatmates at uni knew pretty much every word to Hamilton purely from hearing it from my room. So, like, I am all here for Hamilton. But In the Heights is so good, like just so good. And I saw a really, really good production of it when it was at the King's Cross Theatre in London, which was basically in an old, like, disused railway platform. So the seats were on either side of the stage, and then the middle of it looked like a piece of the street, basically, like outside the bodega and the hair salon that In the Heights is set in. It's set in the small area of New York in Washington Heights, and it's all about, like, the place kind of being gentrified and the people that live there not really being able to afford to live there anymore. And it's about immigrants in this community and sort of the identity that they have as being American but also being from these other places, and it's so good. If you think of, like, the more modern style music there's in Hamilton, Hamilton draws on a lot of hip-hop and R&B references. In the Heights also draws on that, but it also draws on a lot of, like, Latin influenced music as well, and just the way it all comes together is so good. Like, Carnaval del Barrio is a really, really good example of that, because it's got that sort of Latin inspired rhythm to it, but then also does have your sort of signature Lin-Manuel Miranda, like, hip-hop style as well, and it is just all about, like, that pride in your community, and yeah, so good. I wish that they would do a new staging of this in the UK. Speaking of shows that they need to do a new staging of in the UK, this one they actually did a staging of this year, and I could not get tickets for it, and you have no idea how much it pains me that I have not seen this show yet, because so I'm talking about Spring Awakening. Spring Awakening is my number 9 show. Right, so this is a really weird one to explain because it is about, like, sexual repression in the Victorian era. It's basically about these kids who haven't really had, like, sex education, so they don't really understand what is happening to them, to their bodies, like, sort of how they're feeling about other people, all of this stuff, and because their parents don't want to teach it to them, and for them that ends up going very badly because they don't really know how things work. They can end up in situations that are very much unwanted because they don't really know any better. But then also you've got, like, a lot of side characters who are going through other things that are kind of related, so there are a lot of trigger warning in this, I should say. There's stories of abuse in here. There's somebody who's really struggling with his mental health to the point where suicide becomes a plotline as well. There are also characters who are figuring out that they are attracted to people of the same sex, and as you can imagine, in the Victorian era that was handled very differently to how it is handled now. Like, there are some very heavy topics in this show, and to be honest, if you put on the cast recording, it sounds depressing as hell. Like the music is quite sad. There's a couple of songs that are more upbeat that I can recommend to people. I think I did actually recommend one particular song to my group of friends, and then some of them listened to it, and then I was like, just word of warning, this is not representative of the entire show. It is a very different vibe, but it's so beautiful. It's actually the musical I put on whenever I do feel sad because it's just quite cathartic because of just, like, the melodies of the music. Like, oh, it's so good. And yeah, there was a production of it earlier on this year at the Almeida, and I could not get tickets for it. I was, like, not travelling down. I wasn't sure if I was travelling down, and then when I did end up actually going to London, the tickets had already sold out, and it was on years ago. When it first started on Broadway, it transferred over to the West End, but I was like 17 years old, I think, and could not travel down to London by myself to go and see it. And I remember we went to go and see something else, and we walked past the theatre and it had just closed, but the posters were all still outside, and I was like, oh my god, I wanted to see that, and I didn't even know it was on at the time, and it really, really upsets me because I would love to see this show. I would have loved to have seen the original cast with, like, Jonathan Groff and Lea Michele and John Gallagher Jr. Like, ignoring any opinions that I may have on Lea Michele later on, like, the Spring Awakening cast recording. So good. And another one that's linked to Lea Michele, although I'm going to be talking more about the version by the icon that is Barbara. Funny Girl is my number 8 show. Funny Girl is a movie musical that I put on whenever I feel ill. Whenever I'm ill, I don't know why. It just became a thing that I do, and I really, really love it. This one is based on a true story. It's about a woman called Fanny Bryce who performed in something called the Ziegfeld Follies, which was a show on Broadway that had, like, lots of different numbers that didn't necessarily have, like, a story linked to them. It was more like a cabaret style show, but it was all put together by one person, hence it being like Ziegfeld Follies. And she was a performer in that, but she wasn't necessarily the conventional beauty that would be cast in those things, and she ended up doing it as more of, like, a comedic route. And this is just, like, the story of her rise to stardom and also her relationship with a man called Nicky Ornstein. And the original Broadway production and the film version in the 60s starred Barbra Streisand, who I adore because she is Barbara. And then we didn't have, like, a new production of it for quite a while, and until it came back to the West End. I feel like it was probably about 10 years ago at this point. It had Sheridan Smith in it, although I didn't actually see Sheridan Smith. She went off ill for a period of time because of a family issue, and I ended up seeing her understudy, Natasha Barnes, who was phenomenal in the role. It's then recently had its first Broadway revival, which has had some drama because Beanie Feldstein was cast and basically she didn't sing it in the way that Barbara did. Like, she hasn't got as strong of a voice and she played it more for the comedic route, and the reviews were not great. So what they did is kind of like ended her contract early, but handled it very badly how they did that. Brought in Leah Michelle to play it instead, in like a very meta move, because her character in Glee was all about playing Fanny Bryson, Funny Girl. And then the really ridiculous part is that in the last week they've released a cast recording of Leah Michelle doing it, but they never actually released a cast recording of Beanie Feldstein, who was actually like the originator of the role in this production, which is not something you normally do. Like, you may do like you might do a recording for a new cast, but generally you would have done the original cast first, because it's all very strange. But anyway, I do kind of want to see it on Broadway. It's not even for Leah Michelle. There's an actor called Ramin Karimloo who's playing Nicky Arnstein at the minute, and I love Ramin Karimloo. He's the first person I ever saw as Phantom, and I would love to see his version of it. And I'm not even really telling you why I love the show now. I'm just telling you about the drama of it. But I'm very invested right now. I actually need to listen to the full cast recording because I've only watched like a reaction video that somebody did to it, and I need to listen to the full thing, and I think I might end up becoming obsessed with it, even though I was telling myself like I don't need to listen to it because I don't agree with how they treated Beanie Feldstein in that show, but also like a new recording of Funny Girl, yes please. I will say though, no one's ever going to beat Barbara. I actually went to see Barbra Streisand in concert a few years ago, and she sang some songs from Funny Girl. She did actually sing the wrong words to Don't Rain on My Parade though, but it was okay. We all helped her out in the audience. She went like into the wrong verse at the wrong part, and but regardless of that, it was phenomenal. Like, it's just so good. I love Barbara so much, and this is like the pinnacle Barbara film musical, really. At number 6, we have another one where it is actually more the film version than the stage version. That is why I love it so much, and it is Singing in the Rain. Basically, I grew up watching a lot of the like old-fashioned musicals. My mum really likes them, so I like grew up watching like Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, Annie Get Your Gun, Calamity Jane, all of those sorts of ones. But the one that I would like willingly choose to watch on my own a lot was Singing in the Rain. I don't know what it is. There's just something about it that I absolutely love. I mean, I do know what it is. I think part of like the fact that there is a musical about making a film, like I like stuff that is about the film industry, so that's always going to appeal to me. But also like Gene Kelly is fantastic. Debbie Reynolds is amazing. Like, it's so good. It's such a good film. It's another one that I would put on to cheer me up a lot. It's also one that I associate with this time of year a lot because it is always shown around about Christmas time, so I am due a rewatch of it soon. I have seen the stage show twice. The first time I went to see it was like a bigger production because it was doing a longer stay in Manchester. Second time I went, it was just like a short 1 week stay in Sheffield. But the first time it was a longer stay, so they were able to like really make it rain when they did the Singing in the Rain scene, and we paid extra money and we sat in like the front section, and it's called the splash zone. So when he was like stomping around in the water like came off the stage at you, which sounds like something you shouldn't pay extra money for, but it was so fun. And what's weird about this musical is that it's not necessarily something I should love, because I always have issues with songs being in musicals just for the sake of being in there. Like, they're not necessarily there to further the story. And the weird thing about this film is that it was actually a film first before it was a stage show, and it was basically made up of a load of songs that had been written for other films and not used, and they kind of shoved them together so that Gene Kelly could make this film that was like a love letter to musicals and the film industry. And like to the point where there's this random like dream sequence in the middle that has nothing to do with the film whatsoever. Doesn't even feature the main female actress because she wasn't like a trained dancer in the way that needed to be for this particular moment. So Gene Kelly just brings in this random other dancer, does like a 10-minute long song and dance number in the middle that is literally just him dreaming up something that he could film in his head, and like does nothing to further the plot whatsoever. But I am here for every single second of it. Like, it's so good. It's just so good. I'm getting to the point now where I'm talking about my favourite shows, and all I'm saying is it's just so good. Like, yeah. I don't know if I mentioned, actually, I used to dance when I was younger, so big dance numbers in shows do tend to appeal to me, which is one of the reasons why I love Singing in the Rain as well, because there is a lot of dancing in it. The film was directed by Gene Kelly as well, who was known for his dancing, so it is very heavily dance inspired, as was like Newsies earlier on when I mentioned that one. That's one of the things I really like about it, is because of the dance numbers, just for like personal reasons of me really loving dance in general. But now we're going to go to one that has very little dancing in it, but it's the emotions. Right, so we're going to talk about The Last 5 Years. So this is a strange musical that I feel like you need to know the concept of before you go into it, because otherwise it can be very, very confusing. So basically you have two characters. There are only two characters in this entire show. You have Kathy and you have Jamie. They have a 5-year relationship. At the very beginning of the show, you know that this story does not end up well. They end up splitting up. Now, the reason that you know this is because you have both of their storylines being told side by side. So Jamie's goes from the beginning of their relationship and it goes all the way through to the end of their relationship. Kathy's starts at the end of their relationship and works its way backwards to the beginning of their relationship. So the only time that these characters actually sing together is right in the middle of the show. Now, the normal stage productions of this, I believe, actually have them completely off stage from each other. So when Kathy's on stage, Jamie's not on stage, and vice versa, until it gets to that middle song and then the finale at the end as well. But there is a film adaptation with Anna Kendrick and Jeremy Jordan, which obviously has to have them like interacting with each other, because it'd be very weird if they didn't, but it still has like the backwards and forwards thing. And then the version that I saw on stage actually made it a little bit different, because they had the actors as actor musicians, so they were actually playing the accompaniments for the other person when they were singing their songs. So like the first song is called Still Hurting, and it is Kathy's song, and Jamie was sat there playing the piano for Kathy, and then it went on Shik's a Goddess, which is Jamie's song, and Kathy started playing the piano for Jamie instead. And I really, really liked how that worked. It was in quite a small theatre. It was at the Southwark Playhouse, and basically there were only like 3 rows of seats. It was in the round, so the seats were all the way around the stage, and I was on the front row, and it very much felt like you were in this space with them. And for this like relationship that is both like building up and breaking down at the same time, it worked like really, really well to be that close to the drama. I really, really loved that production. I know it did transfer over to like a bigger theatre on the West End. I don't know if it would have worked as well there, but the way that it was where I saw it, so good. And the film is spectacular. It's a really interesting one to think about, because obviously, like I said, you know this relationship isn't going to end well, and I always find it an interesting topic of conversation to say like whose side you're on. I mean, to be honest, I'm not really on either of them's side. They both make really silly decisions. One of them goes into a relationship that they probably never should have been in the first place, because they knew it wasn't what they wanted, and then another one goes into the relationship with good intentions but then does some very, very questionable things during the course of the relationship instead. But it's just really interesting seeing these two characters who at some points seem to work so well together, but at other points really, really don't. It's like you should never have been a couple, and it's really like, and it's really interesting because you see those songs like directly after each other, so you go from really rooting for them 1 minute to like being like, no, stay away from each other in the next second. And also the actual music in this is beautiful, like the piano music. Jason Robert Brown, who wrote this one, is known for like complicated piano medleys, and there is just like there's this one particular piece of music that follows through from the very beginning, and it's the very last thing you hear at the end of the show as well, and it's one of my favourite pieces of music ever written. I love it so much. Speaking of pieces of music, I can't not mention a Stephen Sondheim show on this list. Sondheim was just like a master of music and of lyrics, and wasn't afraid to make those things complicated. Like, he didn't have to like hold back and make it into something that could like easily be like a breakaway pop hit and go into the charts. He was happy to give you like a monologue as a song, and I loved it so much. My favourite Stephen Sondheim show is Company, particularly the gender switch version. So basically the original version of Company is about a man called Bobby. It's his 30th birthday, and all of his friends are gathering to wish him happy birthday, but also they start pressuring him to kind of settle down and get married, because they're all in relationships. There's an older friend who's on like a 4th marriage at this point. There's a couple that's his age that's been married for a while. There's a couple that's about to get married, and I'm going to get onto those in a minute because that's one of my favourite moments. And it is basically just about sort of Bobby at this point in his life and kind of figuring out where he wants to go from here, and if he does want to settle down. Like, there's not too much in the actual story, to be honest. Like, it's just a snapshot of these people's lives. But I particularly love the gender swap version, because basically in a recent production, I think it was 2018, it was directed by Marianne Elliott, and they gender swapped a few of the characters, most particularly Bobby. Bobby became a woman, and if you think about it, the whole reaching the age of 30 and that pressure to settle down has a very different connotation when it's a woman than when it's a man, because obviously not for everyone, because it depends on what you want in life. But for some people, you do have that question of whether or not you want to have kids, and that sort of biological clock ticking, and also just like the expectation for women to settle down is very, very different from the expectation for men to settle down. So I think the storyline just hits a lot different when it's portrayed by a woman, and I really, really loved it. And also Rosalie Craig as Bobby was like so good. But also we had another gender swap character, so one of the couples, instead of being male female, ended up being male male, and we had the character of Jamie, who was played by Jonathan Bailey, who you may know from Bridgerton. He's going to be Fiyero in the new Wicked film, and he sang my favourite song in the show, which is Not Getting Married Today, which is basically about this character having a breakdown on the morning of their wedding. And it's like one of the fastest songs in musical theatre. Like, anyone that can memorise those lyrics and perform it on stage, I am in awe of. And the way that Jonathan Bailey played it was so good. He deserved the Olivier Award for that show. Okay, so that was number 5. I didn't actually say we're in my top 5 at the minute. So we're going to go on to number 4. Now, this is number 4 at the minute because it is my current obsession. There is a chance it may move lower because, like, some of the others may be like, oh, actually, this has stood the test of time a little bit more. But if you've watched any of my videos, you've heard me talk about this one a lot recently, so it couldn't not be quite high up on my list. It's Moulin Rouge. Now, Moulin Rouge is actually my favourite film of all time, like the Ewan McGregor, Nicole Kidman version. It's so good. I've loved it since I first saw it. I could watch that film on repeat. I can quote that film in its entirety to you. I just adore it. Like, the drama of that film, the spectacle of it, like, it just all comes together so well. And I've been wanting a stage show of it for years, but I was also like terrified of there being a stage show because I loved the film so much and I didn't know if it would translate on stage. And then I saw things of the Broadway production and I was so excited for it because the Broadway production looked so good. And I was supposed to go and see it for my 30th birthday, which was in November 2020. You know where I'm going with this. That trip did not happen for obvious reasons. We were not allowed to enter the US at that point in time. And that meant not only did I miss going to see it on Broadway, I also missed being able to see the original cast on Broadway, because at the time that I booked my holiday, Aaron Tveit was still in it and I was hoping that he would still be in it by the November. And unfortunately, I did not get to see Aaron Tveit as Christian in Moulin Rouge. I've watched many a clip of him do it, but I've never actually been able to see him on stage. And yes, that does break my heart. Like, I really hope that he does a London concert at some point because I just need to see him sing live, but that is a whole different thing. I did get tickets to see the London production when it first started. It started like the end of November and I got tickets to see it in January, so it was quite early on in the run. And I was so excited to go and see it because, like I said, the Broadway one looked fantastic. I'd listened to the cast recording a lot. I'd fallen in love with like a stage version of Christian and Satine. And then I saw the London production. Like, it wasn't bad. Like obviously the staging is amazing. The dancing is spectacular. What they've done to the theatre is so good. I really like Clive Carter playing Harold Zidler. I liked some of the supporting cast. I liked Jason Pennycook as Toulouse-Lautrec. I liked quite a lot of things. The problem is what I didn't like was the 2 main actors, and in particular the guy who's playing Christian. I have heard people say he got better as the run went on, but I just feel like and he wasn't, and to be honest, he wasn't awful. I just don't think he was ready for that role. He was fresh out of drama school and I just think it was too much for him. And I did see him quite a few months apart as well, actually, because I saw it in January and I saw it in July, and I didn't like his version either time. Like, there was something lacking about it. Like, it just felt like there wasn't enough depth to the character. And vocally, like, there were moments where he really stood out, but then there were other moments where I was just like, I'm just not feeling this. And then with the Satine, like, she was fine, but it had some accent issues. And I think because I just didn't buy the chemistry between the two of them as well. Like, she didn't do anything particularly wrong, but it was just like the two of them did not work together. So I happily went back to listening to the cast recording, got like very obsessed with Aaron Tveit's version of it yet again. We're absolutely fine. And then they announced a cast change in London, and they announced that Jamie Moscato was playing Christian. And I've already spoke about how much I love Jamie Moscato's performance as JD earlier on in this video. And basically Jamie Moscato is someone that when people like originally talking about who could play Christian in the London production of Moulin Rouge, Jamie Moscato was someone who I was like, this would really work. I really hope they cast him. They've cast him for the first cast change, and I had a chance to go and see it a couple of weeks ago, and so good. Like, just made, like, it was what I wanted the first time I saw the Moulin Rouge stage production to be. Like obviously I will never know whether I would prefer Aaron Tveit's version of Christian or Jamie Moscato. Hello, this is Editing Chloe here, jumping in to add an update about Moulin Rouge, because I haven't actually edited the Moulin Rouge section yet, but I remember from when I filmed it that I talked about the fact that I had not been able to see Aaron Tveit on Broadway. Slight update, Aaron Tveit is returning to Moulin Rouge for 12 weeks starting in January, and within the next week I should have booked my trip to go and see him in February, because me and Meg were already planning on going to New York in May, and we've just moved that trip up a little bit earlier so that I get to see Aaron Tveit, and it also means there's more chance that she'll get to see the cast she wants to see in Hadestown. It works out well for everyone. So the disappointed Chloe in this video who thought she'd never get to see Aaron Tveit in Moulin Rouge, had a little bit of a breakdown the week after when she found out that she actually would. But if all I got to see was Jamie Moscato's, I was happy. Like, it's just so good. I am very much contemplating getting tickets to go and see him next month again, because I can't even like tell you how good his version of Christian was. And the thing is it's quite different from what I've seen him in before. I mean, I've seen him in Heathers and I've seen him in Les Mis, and every role I've seen him in has been quite different, and this one, like, sort of the innocence of Christian at the beginning, and like this one sort of like the innocence of Christian at the beginning and him falling in love with Satine is done so well. But then when the doubt starts to creep in and his personality switches when it gets to Roxanne and Rolling in the Deep, he does that so well. Like, I knew he could do that because obviously said that is one of the things that I really liked in Heathers, but it's just the way that it's done in his version in Moulin Rouge. So good. I'm gonna stop talking now. Right, these are my top 3. These are the 3 that are pretty much set in stone. It's gonna take a lot to budge any of these. We're gonna start with number 3. Number 3 became my comfort musical for a while, and I am still really upset that I can't see this on stage anymore, because if I had the opportunity to see this as much as I wanted to, I would be up to like 50 times of seeing this show at this point. That musical is Waitress. Right, my story with Waitress is that I watched the film when it was first released because I liked Nathan Fillion and I wanted to see him in it. Really enjoyed it. When they announced they were doing a musical of it, I listened to the cast recording quite quickly. Really loved that. Was desperate to see it in the UK, and then it took a couple of years to come over. When they announced it was coming over, I booked tickets straight away. Like I went to see it in previews. I wasn't living in London at the time, but I happened to be going down when it was on previews, so I bought tickets. I saw it when it was Catherine McPhee as Jenna, and it was, what is his name? The guy from 30 Rock as... I can't remember his name, but the guy from 30 Rock that was in it as... But the guy from 30 Rock that was in it as Ogie, Jack something or other, Jack McBrayer, that is his name. Jack McBrayer was playing Ogie, and then the rest of the cast was made up of what would be sort of the ongoing West End cast. So David Hunter as Dr. Pomatter, who I love so much. Marisha Wallace as Becky. There was just like a really good cast there. Catherine McPhee was not my favourite as Jenna, I will say. I will say, like, I feel like she could sing it well, but the acting was lacking just a little bit. But overall, I really love the show. I took my mum to see it a couple of months later just before Catherine McPhee left, and I still really loved it. And then I moved down to London, managed to get a cheap ticket for it because this one didn't sell too well like midweek. And I worked a job where I often had midweek days off, so I got myself another ticket because I wanted to see Lucy Jones, who had recently taken over as Jenna. And Lucy Jones is just like made for this role. She is so good. I've seen her in other things. I'm planning on seeing her in other things in the future, but I don't think I will ever see her in something that beats her Jenna. Like, it was just so good. And like I said, this became very much a comfort watch for me. Like it has a bit of everything. Like if you're having a really good day, it's got like some really happy songs in there that just kind of go along with that mood. If you're having a bit of a rubbish day, it has some songs that you can cry to and feel like really cathartic as well. And I just love it. Again, the music is beautiful. It's not necessarily your typical musical theatre music. It's written by Sarah Bareilles, and there are some like bigger belty numbers, but there are also like some really interesting things, like Soft Place to Land, for example, is a really interesting piece of music, and it's a lot more gentle and calm, and I love that one. It's beautiful. That's one. And I was actually lucky enough to see Sarah Bareilles perform as Jenna as well later on in the run, and her version of Jenna was really interesting to see because it wasn't as big like belty musical theatre actress as I'd seen other people do it, but it kind of focused more on the nuance of the lyrics, and she did some like interesting riffs on things because obviously she was the one who wrote it, so she was able to play around with it a little bit more. And I've actually ended up seeing 5 different people play Jenna at the 11 performances of it that I've been to see, and I think I've seen 3 different Dr. Pomaters because I've seen David Hunter many times. I saw his cover, whose name I cannot remember, and I saw Gavin Creel. David Hunter is my favourite. Like, there's just something about like the physicality that he brings into playing Pomatter and like the goofiness of it that is just fantastic. Like, I can understand why Jenna would enter into that relationship with Dr. Pomatter. I'm not even telling you the storyline of this one. It's about a woman who lives in like a small town and she's trapped in this like really awful marriage, and she ends up getting pregnant, and then she starts an affair with her OBGYN, and it's basically about her kind of realising that she needs to get herself out of this situation. But alongside all this, she's a waitress in a pie shop and she bakes pies throughout it, so a lot of it is also about baking. It is a beautiful show, and I'm very sad that it is not on in the UK anymore because the tour finished earlier on this year, and that is the end of it for the time being, which is sad. Okay, we have reached my top 2 musicals. I'm sorry if this video is very long. Now, I may shock some people here. I mean, I've definitely mentioned what my favourite musical is before, but I feel like if you know some things about me, you may think that these are in a different order, because there is a musical that I have seen the most times, and then there is my favourite musical, and they are not the same thing. So, at number 2, we have The musical that I've seen the most times, which is 24 times currently on stage. Yes, I do need to get it to 25 now. It's like a really weird number to leave it at 24. And that is Les Miserables. Now, I have seen various different versions of Les Mis. I've seen the original London staging of it, complete with the Revolve. I've seen the new London staging when for some reason they took that Revolve away. I don't understand. I've seen a couple of different concert versions. I saw the 25th anniversary concert. I saw the staged concert that they did when they were taking away the Revolve, and also they brought that back as a sort of COVID safe, as sort of a COVID distancing measure as well. I've seen a tour production and I've seen a touring production. As you can see, I've seen various different types of Les Mis. It's still not got old to me. Like, I can't even explain why. Like, there is something about the storyline. Obviously, it's quite a big storyline. It takes in a lot. It's the essential story of it is it's about this character called Jean Valjean who ends up in prison because he steals a loaf of bread to feed his sister and his nephew. But it's then about him being released from prison and trying to make his way in the world, but realising he's always going to be sort of held back by the reputation that being a former prisoner has. So he decides to break his parole and try and live a life out of that shadow. But the entire time he's being hunted down by a police officer who knew him from when he was in prison, called Javert. And that is kind of the main storyline of it. There is also, though, this running thread about a character called Cosette, who is the daughter of a character called Fantine, who's just found herself in a really awful position in her life. Cosette ends up being taken in by Valjean, and then that plays into him sort of being on the run, but also trying to protect Cosette, who is now his daughter. And then there's a whole storyline about these students who are rebelling against the government, and then loads of people die in that conflict. Like, there's so much going on in it. It's so much drama. But the overall sort of story of it is just the story of this man's life, and him just trying to be a good person, but also trying to move on from things that might hold him back. And it's really, really beautiful, and I love it so much. And to be honest, I could break down all my favourite performances of all the main characters in this, because it is an ensemble piece. There's quite a lot of actors in it. I could talk about standout ones, I have a favourite Valjean and a favourite Javert and all of those sorts of things. And I could talk about Les Mis for hours. I mean, if you want me to do a full video where I talk about all the different casts I've seen and break down my dream cast of Les Mis of all time, I can happily do that for you, but now is not the time for it. But basically, I think it is a show that if you are a fan of musical theatre, you should try and see at some point. I think it's a fundamental show to see, and I can very definitely understand why it is the longest running musical in the world. Right, so we've got to my number one. So like I said, my number two I saw 25 times. This one I have seen 3 times. But if I had access to see it more times, it's like Waitress. I would be in hundreds at this point if I was able to see this as much as I wanted to. So my favourite musical of all time is Rent by It's a musical which was written by Jonathan Larson and hasn't necessarily had the best sort of track record with productions in the UK. It had a production when it first... it had a production back in the 90s when it first started. And then they tried to do some weird productions where they moved it over to... when they moved the setting of it to London. They did one where they made it... They've done ones where they've made it more modern day, but then that doesn't really make sense because it is very definitely set during the AIDS crisis. That is the whole storyline of it. Let me explain the storyline. It's about a bunch of friends who live in what is called Alphabet City in New York, which is basically one of the poorer areas of New York, and they're all artists in some way. So you've got a filmmaker, you've got a performance artist, you've got a drag queen, you've got a dancer, various people who are living that sort of bohemian lifestyle. And it's about the struggles that go alongside that, partially financially. The reason why it's called Rent is that they're all constantly at threat of being kicked out of where they live, but also to do with gentrification and being kicked out of the areas that they live because people are coming in and redeveloping them and they can't afford to live there anymore. So there's also a lot of discussions on drug use, and as I said, it is set during the AIDS crisis, so you do have various characters in this who are HIV positive, and again, I will warn you, it gets sad, people die. It's actually based on La Boheme, the opera by Puccini, and it's just so good. It uses more modern music. It's a rock opera, and again, I particularly love the songs and the music in there, but I love all the characters so much. There's not one of them that I don't like in this show, and it's an ensemble piece, but they're all integral to the plot, and it's just I don't know how to describe why I love it so much, but there is just something about it that captures my heart, and I love it, I originally saw this musical when I saw the film version, which features most of the original Broadway cast. I've also watched the recording of the last Broadway performance that they did, the live one that they did on TV a few years ago, Jordan Vischer in it, and then I have seen it on stage. I saw a concert version with Kerry Ellis for which was for the 20th anniversary, I think it was. I then saw a touring production that had Lucy Jones as Maureen in it, and that was fantastic. That was very similar to the original Broadway staging, which made my heart very happy. And then I saw the version at the Hope Mill Theatre last year, which did some interesting things with the staging that I'd not seen before, and made it and sort of still set it in the time period it needed to be set in, but also made it feel very, very relevant to now. And it was there was something about that production that just came together so well, and there are hints that it might be coming back at some point, and I really, really, really hope it does, because I need to see it again. It's just so good. Like I said, if I had the opportunity to see that show more, I would just never be out of that theatre. I love it. And now I'm gonna go and watch the film, because once again, perfect for this time of year. It's actually told during a 1-year time period, and it starts and ends at Christmas. So in my mind, it could be considered a Christmas film. And on that note, I have been rambling for an hour. This is going to be really, really fun to edit, but I hope it just gave you a little bit more insight into what my favourite musicals are. And yeah, if you're still here, I'm very, very impressed by you. So thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff down below. Let me know what your top 10 favourite musicals are, and I will see you guys next time with a new video. Bye.